Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer-Reiner. These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. No decision at this point has been made with respect to the death penalty. We have requested, and currently Nick Reiner is being held without bail. Now, in announcing these charges, I also want to announce that they're just that. They are charges. Charges are not evidence. Evidence is something that we will be presenting in a court of law to meet the standard of proof we meet in every criminal case, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, to 12 jurors who will unanimously have to find that we've met that standard to prove the charges we bring to court. Right now, with respect to the process, once the charges get filed this afternoon, Nick Reiner will be then brought to court. He is going through medical clearance, something that everybody who gets arrested and gets held in a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department jail goes through. Once he is medically cleared, he will be brought to court to be arraigned on these charges. At that point, he will enter a plea.
What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most respected names suddenly became the center of the most jaw-dropping, confusing, and downright unbelievable stories the industry has whispered about in years? The kind of story that makes people refresh their phones at 2 a.m. wondering how something this dark could ever touch someone so iconic. That's exactly what's been swirling online. And whether you believe every detail or not, the chatter alone has Hollywood absolutely spiraling. So here's what people woke up to seeing all over entertainment feeds. Reports began circulating that Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer-Reiner, were found unresponsive inside their home. Almost instantly, timelines exploded. Fans were confused, industry insiders went quiet, and then, just as people were trying to process that shock, another name entered the conversation that no one was prepared for: their son, Nick. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's be very clear. What follows is based on the reports, online discussion, and what's been said publicly so far. This is still unfolding, and a lot of what's out there is speculation layered on top of incomplete information. But that hasn't stopped the internet from doing what it does best, connecting dots that may or may not actually belong together. According to reports, first responders were called to the Reiner residence after concerns were raised when no one could reach the couple. The details surrounding that moment are murky, and different outlets describe it slightly differently, but the result was the same. Hollywood was hit with news no one expected to hear. People who worked with Rob for decades couldn't believe it. Fans of his films were stunned, and somewhere in the middle of all that disbelief, questions started forming fast. One of the details that stuck with people is who reportedly discovered the scene. It's been said that a family member arrived and made the heartbreaking discovery without initially realizing the full scope of what had happened. That detail alone sent a chill through anyone reading it. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was painfully human. The kind of moment no family should ever experience, especially one that's lived so much of its life in the public eye. As authorities began their investigation, the story took a turn that nobody saw coming. Reports claimed that Nick Reiner, Rob and Michelle's son, was taken into custody, and not a single sentence was enough to flip the entire narrative upside down. Overnight, the story shifted from tragedy to something far more complicated and uncomfortable. People immediately began digging into Nick's past, not in a cruel way, but in that uneasy, searching way people do when they're trying to understand how something like this could even be possible. It's been widely discussed that Nick has been open about struggles earlier in his life. Addiction, recovery, periods of instability, none of that was exactly hidden. In fact, Rob himself had spoken in past interviews about supporting his son through some very difficult chapters. And that's where the story gets even heavier. Just months before all of this, Rob had reportedly spoken publicly about Nick's recovery journey, sounding hopeful, proud, and cautiously optimistic. Those comments are now being replayed everywhere, not because people want drama, but because they feel haunting in hindsight. The internet has a way of turning past interviews into emotional time capsules, and this one hit especially hard. What's strange is how quickly the narrative splintered after that. Some reports claim there was tension in the household leading up to everything. Others suggest there were no obvious warning signs at all. Some say there were arguments. Others say there was nothing out of the ordinary. And right now, no single version of events has been officially confirmed in full. That hasn't stopped speculation from flooding comment sections, though. Suddenly, everyone online became a body language expert, a psychological profiler, and a legal analyst all at once. Clips of old interviews were re-examined, lines from past films were quoted like eerie foreshadowing. Someone even joked that Hollywood writers couldn't come up with a twist this wild, which, as dark as it sounds, is exactly how some people cope with shock. And let's talk about Hollywood's reaction, because that's a story in itself. Celebrities who worked with Rob for years started sharing tributes almost immediately. Some focused on his legacy, others spoke about Michelle and how deeply loved she was behind the scenes. A few admitted they were struggling to wrap their heads around what they were seeing in the headlines. What really caught people's attention, though, were the reactions that hinted at confusion rather than closure. Friends saying things like, "This doesn't make sense," or "I can't reconcile this with the man I knew." Those kinds of statements only added to the sense that something about this story feels unfinished, like a puzzle with pieces still missing.
Then came the legal side of things, which is where the tone online shifted again. Reports claimed serious charges were being considered, including multiple counts related to the deaths. That kind of language alone is enough to make people's stomachs drop. But even then, officials emphasized that the investigation was ongoing and that conclusions hadn't been finalized. In other words, a lot was still unknown, even as the headlines felt definitive. Meanwhile, people couldn't stop talking about the emotional contradiction at the center of it all. Rob Reiner, the man behind some of the most heartfelt, funny, and optimistic films ever made, suddenly being linked to a story this dark felt almost unreal. It was like watching two completely different movies collide, and no one knew which one they were supposed to be in. Some fans tried to lighten the mood the only way they knew how. One viral post joked that if Rob were somehow watching all of this from afar, he'd probably be furious about how messy the third act was. Dark humor? Absolutely. But also very on brand for a fan base raised on sharp wit and uncomfortable truths. Others focused on Michelle, pointing out how often she was described as the emotional backbone of the family. Stories resurfaced about her influence on Rob's work, her advocacy, and how she quietly shaped decisions without ever chasing the spotlight. In many ways, people realized they hadn't given her enough credit while she was alive, which made the loss feel even heavier. And then there's the part of the story that people are still afraid to talk about openly. The idea that unresolved struggles, even ones that seem under control, can resurface in ways no one expects. That possibility alone has made this story resonate far beyond Hollywood. It's not just gossip anymore, it's a reminder that fame doesn't protect anyone from real-world pain. At the same time, it's important to remember that rumors move faster than facts. Some claims floating around online have already been questioned or quietly walked back. Others remain unverified. And yet, once something is out there, it takes on the life of its own. That's the danger and the fascination of celebrity culture all rolled into one. As days passed, more reactions poured in. Old collaborators shared memories that felt almost defiant against the darkness of the situation, choosing to remember laughter, creativity, and kindness instead. A few even said they hoped people would allow space for truth to emerge rather than rushing to judgment. That sentiment hasn't exactly slowed the internet down, but it has added a note of pause. What makes this story linger is that there's no clean narrative yet. No clear villain, no simple explanation, just a family tragedy wrapped in decades of public life, examined under the harshest spotlight imaginable. And until official conclusions are reached, that uncertainty is likely to remain. So where does that leave everyone watching from the outside? Somewhere between shock, sadness, curiosity, and a strange sense of disbelief. This is one of those Hollywood stories that reminds people that behind every famous name is a family dealing with real consequences, not just headlines. As more information comes out, the tone may change again. Details could clarify things or complicate them further. But for now, the story sits in that uncomfortable space where gossip, grief, and unanswered questions overlap. And if there's one thing Hollywood has taught us, it's that the truth always comes out eventually.
sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively, and sometimes in ways no one expects. If you want to stay up to date on stories like this, the rumors, the reactions, and what's really going on behind the scenes, make sure you subscribe to Inside Hollywood. We'll keep watching so you don't have to refresh your feed at 2 a.m.